Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at My Expat Taxes. For my fellow Americans out there, we all know tax season is upon us, and for anyone who's ever had the pleasure of dealing with multiple tax agencies in multiple countries, you know this can be a challenging experience. That's why when it comes to dealing with anything tax-related abroad, I always recommend hiring a pro to help you navigate this unknown space. In my experience, this not only saves you time and spares you from the unnecessary headaches, it also has literally saved me thousands of dollars in taxes over the years. So I am super excited to introduce you to My Expat Taxes, a true pro in this space that focuses 100% on U.S. expat taxes. Whether you're filing for 2023, catching up on back taxes, predicting a future tax obligation for a future move abroad, or just looking for some guidance, My Expat Taxes has your back with speedy and affordable online filing options and real human accountants to assist you as needed. Join the more than 16,000 other Americans living abroad who have used their services by visiting myexpattaxes.com via the link in the show notes. My guest today is my new friend, Nathalie Goldstein, who's a fellow U.S. expat living abroad in Austria, a country we have not spent much time talking about here on About Abroad. And I was really excited to get Nathalie on the show to reflect on her move from California to Austria, how she made it happen, and some of the ups and downs of that move along the way, including starting a business and building a family in a foreign country. Nathalie is also the founder and CEO at My Expat Taxes, which is one of our proud sponsors of this season. So it was great to finally get a chance to meet with her and talk a little bit more about some of the main challenges from a financial aspect that our About Abroad listeners might find if they're moving abroad, and also tie that into her personal story. So a lot of fun and a bit of practical information wrapped up into this one. Please help me in welcoming Nathalie to About Abroad. Yeah, so I actually have this like little theory in my mind. Like when I look at the map of Europe, or when I've traveled through Europe, there are like certain countries that I find are totally underrated. They're like off the radar for that first time traveler that's going to maybe make their first trip over to Europe, for example. And Austria sits like right at the top of that list for me. It's such a beautiful place, so much history, perfect location in the middle of Europe to get to other places. And I kind of have fallen in love with this place, but I do find like a lot of people it's not like on the radar for that first time European traveler. And I don't know, as you live there now, like, I don't know if you have a similar perspective, but I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, whenever I tell my friends back home, or honestly, any stranger that asks where I live, and I say I live in Austria, the first question is, wow, you live very far away. And I'm like, well, first off, let's stop you there. It's not Australia. It's Austria. And then you get that look of like, do you speak Austrian? Like, no, it's German.
Do you have kangaroos?
Yeah, we do have kangaroos, I believe, in Schönbrunn. But other than that, they're imported. They're not naturally here. Austria is totally underrated. But honestly, it's just, I don't know. You have big brother Germany right there next to you. So how can it not be underrated? It's a small country. Once upon a time, used to rule a lot of the world. If you go to any of the museums or anything here, they'll tell you that at one point the sun never set in the Austrian Empire, but the sun does set now. So yeah, it's underrated, but a beautiful country.
It really is. Yeah. That's hilarious. I can totally imagine. It's funny. I don't know if you know this or not. Like, I can't remember if we've touched on this before in some of our messages back and forth over the years, but I actually studied abroad in Austria. So like, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, my first trip outside of the U.S. was to Australia, and then I think my second trip outside of the U.S. was to Austria when I went to study abroad. And so I had my eyes set on Australia first, but Austria came in close second. But the truth is I was like dying to go to a place to do my study abroad in a alpine place and go snowboarding and be there in Central Europe to travel off by train to other places. And I initially started looking at Switzerland, found out very quickly Switzerland was A, super expensive, and B, didn't match with my study abroad program. And so then like quickly found this amazing program in Austria, and there started my love affair with this beautiful country.
Okay, and where in Austria were you
I was in
exactly?
Salzburg.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then you're really in like the beautiful mountain area, and like it's hard to not fall in love. I think living and working there is probably a little bit harder because it's very I mean, it's not very touristy, but it's definitely more for the nature lovers versus the. Is there such thing as a tech lover? Is that what I am? I don't know.
I think there are
But
some
yeah,
people that would classify as that for sure.
okay. I don't know if I would classify myself as that. Um, but it's not that easy for those that, are working mainly in front of a computer. Let's put it that way. But Salzburg is beautiful. Vienna is a great city. I mean, it's rated, I think, pretty much every year as the best place to live in the world. Also, one of the grumpiest cities to live in, which is super funny, super true. Beautiful city, super grumpy locals. I don't know why, but they're only grumpy if you're not Austrian, if you
That's
don't speak
great for
German.
expats.
Yeah, it's only grumpy if you don't speak German.
Oh,
So,
good.
but
How's your Deutsch then? I hope it's okay.
it's all right. It could be
Yeah.
improved. Let's put it that way. But no,
You've been
Austria's,
filing lots of taxes. It's tough to make time for German, you know?
yeah. To be fair, I live a little bit more on the countryside, so German is my private life, the main language, so to say. But in my daily interactions, it's English, right? Which is the nice part about taxes, since it's American taxes and it's in English. But we'll get to that more interesting bit later, if you can call it
Right.
interesting,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Tax.
Leave people hanging with the tax hook.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what, well, actually, yeah, Vienna, I find is like, this is an incredible thing because yeah, as you said, I believe, I don't know what index it was. I mean, I see this all the time, but it pops up as like one of the most livable city in the world, the most, best city in the world for expats. Austria's, got some of the best social infrastructure in the world. Relatively, cost of living compared to some other major cities and other countries in Europe, it's not like, at the top of those lists, and but then you do see some like city, like, I don't know, Denmark, for example, is always at the top of that like happiness index. But when I talk to my Danish friends, they're like, I don't know, we're kind of like grumpy a little bit here. Like it's cold weather. And I don't really see how this is the case. So I think a lot of that has to do with the social, infrastructure that you have there. But, is that like you live there in Vienna, and it's funny to hear you say that about the locals, like, and that kind of paradox between it's this amazing place to live and it wins all these awards, but then also like there is the reality of actually like dealing with people as an expat there. So like, yeah, can you elaborate on this a little bit for us?
Maybe it's the fact that it's such a beautiful and easy city to live in that you have to find something else to complain about, or like that your tolerance is super low of anything that's not comfortable because it's so comfortable. But no, it's easy city. Like you go in, obviously German is the hardest barrier, but most things are written in English. The public transport's amazing. You can get anywhere in Vienna for €1 a day. You can really buy a year card for all public transportation, and it costs €365 for the entire year. So €1 a day for everything. If you go to the restaurants, there's always a lunch special that's probably under €10, right? I don't know. You go there and it's just easy. Every menu, you can find an English menu. It tells you all of the allergies on the menu. Like it's it's such an accommodating city. But when it comes to social interactions, there's a lot of other expats. So you're definitely going to find, a bubble with the other expats. But what I always find it is, if for the true Viennese, right, and in general in the Austrian system, you go to kindergarten, and then with the same people you go to kindergarten, you also then go to elementary school, and then you go with them then to, middle school, high school, and university. And so those friend groups have started in kindergarten. So if you're an expat, I mean, good luck to try to squeeze yourself into a friend group that's been there since, people were literally in diapers. So I think that's one part why it's seen as being grumpy. I mean, they're not really grumpy, right? I don't think anyone intentionally means to be grumpy, but if you're looking to make friends with people that have lived in Vienna their whole lives and you're an expat, it's a little harder because, I mean, they're not going to accommodate to English for you. They'll try, but obviously once you get past the politeness and it goes into normal conversation, they're going to drift back into German. They have their friend groups from pre-K, and so I think that can be seen a little as grumpy, so to say. But everyone's generally nice. There's a few funny sayings. This is from my Viennese friends, so I'm not complaining about them. I'm listening to them complain about themselves. But there's like a saying that if you give a Viennese person an umbrella when it rains, they'll say, "Great, now I have to hold the umbrella."
You got to find something to complain about
You
in a
got
beautiful place, right?
when it's so beautiful, right? It's human nature to complain. You got to find something, man.
Yeah. It's funny. I know this girl that moved from Korea to London, and she was really having trouble breaking into the social circles there. And so she went to the library and got a book, and the book was like how to make friends with British people. Like, it was like literally the title of the book. And she read it, and like chapter 1 was like, go into the office and complain about the weather. And she's like, I went in the next day, and somebody said, how are you doing? And I said, oh yeah, I'm doing okay, but it's really nasty out there. The weather's really bad. And she goes, it worked. Because they love to complain about the weather. And we had this long conversation, and I made a friend. And anyway, yeah, I do find that like hilarious. Like, sometimes there's some connection over like commiserating together.
Human nature.
Yeah, it is. And you came from California, if I understand correctly, right?
Yep, San
Yeah.
Jose, California.
San Jose,
So
California. Another place that, people really like, would love to call home. But that I think like I always find this kind of fascinating. Like, people in our world, we live in this like expat kind of transient world, right? Where people are flying from one side of the world to the other and moving place to place. And California is a super desirable place for many people. And at the same time, you left California and made your way to Austria, another very desirable place. So if you're up for it, I'd love to hear the story behind how that came to be.
yeah, sure. And I'm gonna start complaining about San Jose because that is in my human nature, and I get to do that because I left. No, San Jose is great. I love San Jose. I love California in general, right? Of course, how can you not? It's California, but it's not the easiest place to live. When you think about it and you think about Vienna, if we're just, let's do that overview first and then I jump into the personal part. But if you're looking at Vienna and everything I just said, public transportation, easy, €1 a day. You can definitely get a good meal at a nice restaurant in the inner city for under €10 or €10 or something like that. Um, Groceries are not that expensive. It's affordable. It's easy. You can rent in the inner city a very nice studio apartment. I did it right for about €1,000 a month, which people thought I was crazy for paying so much, which is dirt cheap if you think about living in San Jose. So in San Jose, I mean, I buy a salad, it's $20.
Yeah.
It's not even, I didn't even add in any protein yet. It's just $20 for
It's just
for the
lettuce
leaves.
and
It's just the
oil.
leaves. But there's no public transportation, so you have to drive everywhere. You're stuck in traffic. I mean, in San Jose, I was working at Cisco. So I worked at Cisco, and without traffic, this is like a 15-minute drive from my parents' house, right, where I grew up. with traffic, literally with traffic, a 15-minute drive will turn up to an hour drive. It's wild. And I'm barely even going onto a freeway or anything. So I would literally wake up at 5 so that I could just go to the gym at Cisco, because it just made no sense to lose an hour to traffic when I'm like, okay, well, I might as well just wake up and work out before and already be at the campus. But those people in Silicon Valley, when they say they wake up at 5, it's not necessarily because they're trying to be super healthy. It's just they don't want to sit in traffic. So that's number one. But anyways, okay, I stopped there. So those were my general things. But it's San Jose and Silicon Valley in general is a great place to live if you're hustling and that's what your main part of your life you want it to be. At least that's my perspective. Everyone has a different one. But if you're there to build something, to be successful, and you're willing to work pretty much 24/7 to get there, Silicon Valley is the place to be, right? If you are like me and you did that and then you burned out at the age of 21, which is really young to burn out, um, yeah, it wasn't the place for me. So anyways, that jumps into the next story. So basically, I was in San Jose. I was in university, you know, taking extra courses, trying to graduate early. I worked at Cisco. I also worked at a fitness like device startup company. So I had basically two part-time jobs in university, hence the burnout at 21. I guess I should go a little bit further back. So 1 year before this, I had studied abroad in London. And actually, no, let's backtrack. So I will, there's a lot of parts to this story, and I'm trying to figure out the best part. But
we got a long form thing here, so you can you could give us all the parts.
Okay, let's backtrack a little bit. So let's start at university. I start at university. Everything's good. Still working, part-time jobs additional to university, because that's just the mentality there. Then basically in my first year there, I meet a very handsome Austrian man, right, who studied abroad at my university. And then he leaves, right? I met him, he leaves. I'm like, would have been great if it worked out. But obviously he lives on the other side of the world, and I've never even left the country. So no chance. Regardless, fast forward then 2 years, I studied abroad in London as your typical American. I go, who do I know in Europe? Because everything's so close, right? So for me, the fact that I'm in London and he's in Vienna doesn't even register that this is far, even though it's like literally different countries.
It's Europe. It's just right there, right?
It's just a 20-minute drive away.
Right.
But basically, so I study abroad, we reunite, and then we date while I'm abroad, and then I go back to California and say, okay, yeah, it's not happening. I'm not leaving Silicon Valley. This is the place to be, right? So he tries to come over at this time. Then, like I said, I'm at university. I'm doing 2 part-time jobs. I'm burning out. I'm starting to question why I want to stay here in Silicon Valley. And then at the same time, he's not successful in trying to find a job in Silicon Valley. And so at one point, I just snap and I go, I don't want to live here. What am I doing? I don't have to live here. I actually am so privileged that I do not have to live here. I have a great college degree. I work in an international company, which was Cisco at the time. I do not have to live in Silicon Valley. This might be where everyone wants to live, but it doesn't mean that this is where I want to live. And so I started telling people, I told my boyfriend, now husband at the time, I don't want to live here anymore. I'm going to go move to Austria. He's obviously overjoyed. And then every single person that will listen to me, I tell them this is what I want to do. I'm going to move there. And then eventually, somehow people listen and they hear me. And it just happens that I'm in the gym at Cisco, one of these morning sessions in the gym. And I hear this lady next to me complain that she has to have an early meeting with her team in Vienna, Austria. I'm like, what? And so I chase her down. Yeah, ears perk up, chase her down, tell her without her asking or even wanting to know anything about me, just tell her, I want to move to Austria. What do you do? How do I go on your team? And basically, I keep popping up in her inbox for about the next 3 months. And eventually I get into her team. And then she says, okay, you do a great job. I approve your move to go to Austria. And then, so that was all while I was in university. And so it lined up that the minute that I could graduate early in March of 2015, I graduated, I finished my last course. I drove to Cisco and I worked my last shift in San Jose. I went home, I packed my bags, took off Friday, and then got on a plane. And then the next Monday, I went into the Cisco Vienna office, badged in, opened my laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and started working. And that's it. I graduated and moved to a different country with a full-time job. So that's my story. It happened very quickly, but honestly, it was the result of a lot of realizations at a very early age. And then, fast forward 2 more months, I already got married in May. So I got married pretty early. We're actually coming up to my 9-year wedding anniversary in a week, which is crazy.
Congrats. Amazing.
Thank you. So it's been a journey, but that is how I ended up from the place to be to the other place to be.
There's so many things I would love to unpack in that story, because you hit on a lot of firsts that I believe we've never touched on in all the episodes we've done here on About Abroad. But and one of them is like leaving the quote unquote place to be to go to your place to be, because I mean, let's be honest, like it's never been easier than it is today to move to another country. Like you in that state 10 years ago, how many years ago was it?
That was 2015. So
2015,
9 years.
9 years ago. So 9 years ago was the same year that I went abroad, like to move abroad for the first time, if I remember correctly. And it was hard. Like what the way you described it made it sound relatively easy. But I think something really interesting to point out there, and this is another first we haven't touched on here on About Abroad, because it actually is pretty hard for most people to do what you did. And that used to be the only way. It was like marriage or your company transfers you to another country. And I'm kind of like generally thinking about Europe when I'm talking about this, because, just like thinking through my mindset at the time also. But this could apply to a lot of countries around the world. It obviously just depends on which country we're talking about. But in Europe, like that was kind of like, if you wanted in, like that was it. There weren't digital nomad visas. There weren't like, a lot of temporary stay visas that could go beyond the 90 days. It was like that's how you get in. And so if you didn't work for a big international company and you didn't randomly bump into a boss that might have a team that you could transfer to in the foreign country that you really wanted to, like, that's really challenging. That's a very limiting, that there's very few opportunities for most of us out there if that's not your situation. But I think it's really cool that you made that happen. Like you decided, first of all, like that's my North Star. That's what I'm going for. I want to move to Austria. It was very like specific, and you had your future husband to help anchor that for you. But what it highlights for me is that that's a very important step, is to like hone in on what you really want. I hear from people all the time who are like, I want to move abroad, or I want to move to Europe. And it's such a wide goal, and there's no like action steps on how to get there. And so yours was like very specific. And I think that's like what I took away from it, is like, you knew exactly where you wanted to go. You knew you knew why you wanted to go there. And you knew some steps that you could take to like basically keep your same job, even if the function changed, like stay in the same company and get there. And like you specifically followed that plan, and it happened relatively easily. So I think that like all comes together as a very cool part of your story.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, with everything in life, obviously not everything you want will work out, but the first step is to know what you actually want. And like you said, it can't be a general goal. It has to be a very specific goal. So this is what I want to do by X date. And then the next step is to tell literally anyone that has ears, right? So almost everyone, obviously, Anyways, so tell anyone that will listen to you what you want, and see who can help you, because people want to help. In general, everyone wants to help if they can, right? And so if you keep telling people what your goal is, eventually you'll find the people that can help you. And the thing is, you just have to keep going. I mean, I say my story in a very short format, right? Because we're not here for, you're not here with me for the whole weekend.
Right. We got to condense it to some level.
Yeah. I give you the abridged version, but it was tough. I mean, in there were applications that got rejected. In there was me thinking I would go to university again and what degree I would take, me trying to apply for a student visa, that not necessarily going through, my parents asking me, what are you going to do there? I mean, I literally, my I tell my dad I'm going to move to Austria. And he goes, well, why did I pay for your college degree if you're going to be a housewife? Nothing wrong with being a housewife. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially I have kids now. That is a hard job to stay home and take care of your kids. Like, I don't think that I can do it. I give so many kudos to all my friends that have that and take that responsibility. I'm like, no, I want paid childcare so I can work. So anyways, to each their own. But like I said, my story is, it happened quickly and it's short and sweet, but I worked very hard to get there. And that's the important thing for everyone to realize is if you want something, it's going to be hard work and there's going to be failures, but eventually you get there. The first step is know what you actually want. I also have friends that say they just want to move abroad and they've said that for the past 10 years. But what does that mean? What country? What are you going to do? Et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, yeah, that's my story. And that's my general principle in life is just, if you want something, go after it.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have the goal in mind, like the end result in mind, at least a bit more concretely than just like, I want to live abroad. And then start working towards that. I also think like the point about networking is so important. Like who you know, not what you know is still valid in a lot of contexts. And I think especially in this one, in our case, like when we moved to Spain, we actually like learned about, like we were having so much trouble finding information about visas that we could apply for. And then we stumbled across, like through word of mouth and through having those conversations with people. And as you said, like talking to anyone that will listen, it was brought to our attention that there was this family that had moved to Spain and had basically, they were doing the same visa that we ended up doing. And we had never heard of this. We couldn't find any information about it except on their little blog, like that they were doing. And so like we reached out to them and we were just like, hey, like, could you tell us how to do this? And we ended up having a call with them. And like, that's what led to us being here and now living in Europe for almost 7 years. So, like that is super important. Like reach out. As you said, people want to help.
People want to help. If they can help you, they will help you, right? If it's possible for them. But if you don't ask for help, I mean, nobody can read your mind.
Yeah.
Not possible.
Yeah. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you in partnership with my friends over at Lamont & Co. If you're planning a retreat, offsite, or group gathering of any kind this year, I highly suggest tapping into their extensive knowledge and experience to help you find the best possible venue for your event. I work with Kim, who has become my trusted advisor when it comes to planning any event around the world, and she's literally saved me hundreds of hours of work and has located venues I never would have found on my own. She even provides me with budget breakdowns and cost estimates for each location I'm interested in and negotiates contract terms on my behalf, all for free. If it sounds too good to be true, I thought the exact same thing at first, but I can assure you this is the real deal. Lamont is paid by the venues, not by you, so there's no cost, risk, or obligation here. So do yourself a favor and contact Lamont via the link in the show notes when you're planning your next group, retreat, offsite, or gathering. Before we dive back into the rest of the interview, I have a small favor to ask of the audience. If you are enjoying this episode and getting some value out of it, then please follow these very simple instructions. Step 1, pick up your phone. I'll give you a second. Step 2, leave a 5-star review for About Abroad. That's it. That's all I'm asking. It takes about 2 seconds. Of course, it is completely free to you, and it is the best possible way to support myself, the show, and everyone working on About Abroad behind the scenes. The funny thing is that there are thousands of people tuning into this show every single week, but we are very likely to only get a few reviews by industry standards, and reviews are the most impactful way that you can show support for the show. So if you have the time, please do so. And either way, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Another thing you mentioned that I kind of alluded to a minute ago that I loved is like, you left sort of the the epicenter of the world in terms of technology.
They
And
really do think it's the
yeah,
epicenter.
yeah. If you spend any time there, that's that's the vibe. And anyway, I think the thing is like we both grew up in the U.S. And this is not exclusive to the U.S., but it just is a fact in the U.S. Like, we grew up with a hustle mentality. Like, what you do is who you are, and working your way up, which I find hilarious. You were 21, like you're pretty young, and you've already like grinded so hard. Is it grinded or ground? I don't know. But
I
you
think
you had
grinded.
been
I think still
grinding.
grinded.
You
Yeah,
had been
I
grinding for years already at that point, and like working multiple jobs. You've landed in the place, to do the thing, and like it would be it will be natural that there are going to be some haters. If they're not vocal about it, they're at least going to be thinking it, and some self-doubt that will creep in, I think, for most of us. Like, is this the right thing to do? Like, I've gotten to this point. I'm on the trampoline that's going to like springboard me into success, career wise. And that's the goal. Right. And so I think there's something like super interesting about doing an about face and like being like, nah, I'm going to go in another direction. And like in our case, we literally had people like doing interventions with us, like groups of friends showing up and be like, you can't do this. You can't throw away the house, the career, the stock option, blah, 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 blah. And, family members, friends, like telling you like, this is not what you do. Like, stop. This is like for young people, and but anyway, like I don't know, most people I meet like yourself, like you seem very happy. You've created a beautiful life for yourself on the other side of the world, and it doesn't feel like you've looked back, and I certainly feel that, and most of the people that come on this show feel that. So like, I don't know, do you ever give that any thought, like looking back at where you were and how you had gotten to that point? Like, is there any part of you that still holds on to that type of lifestyle, or like are you fully settled into where you are now?
I guess answer that with what my mom told me, which is kind of what made me, make the decision to go. Obviously, my mom is very different than my dad. Love them both; they're my best friends. But my mom told me that you can make money anywhere in the world. You cannot find love anywhere in the world, everywhere in the world. So that's the important thing, is to figure out money can always be made. You will always find a way to make money no matter where you are. But the people you meet, I mean, there's technically supposed to be only one person out there for you. I know there will be people that argue against this, but let me live in my little happy bubble, all right, folks? So that's what my mom told me, and that's what I honed in on, is that it's really comes down to, you cannot be so scared of losing what you currently have that you don't even try to gain something else, if that makes sense. The thing is to be fair, I left very early. I left at 21. While I thought at that point I might have had everything in order, I mean, I didn't. I just graduated. I had, you know, two part-time jobs that were good. Like, I technically, the internship I was, or not even internship. So the second part-time job was at this startup company, fitness device. They made 1 million in like a few days. I was their first intern. They asked me if I would even stop going to university and then I could work full time and get stock options. I mean, I said no, because I prefer my college degree. Because another thing my mom said is always that education is the most important thing, that no one can take away from you. But I left at a pretty good part. Like, I was not in, a corporate job already for 10 years. I didn't have, a mortgage or anything. I really had this, I saw it, right? I saw this slot in my life to say, okay, if I'm going to make a decision, do it now. Just jump. And then I was lucky because I could bring my Cisco job into Vienna. I could get a full-time job right away. And so it worked out well. But I mean, I still love California. I'm going back there in a week as well. And I think I'm now at this point in the expat journey where I'm past the traveling, right? I don't care so much about the traveling anymore. You can travel whenever, right? But I'm past the traveling. I'm into the family part, and I think I'm now reaching the next part of the expat dream of, I actually want to live in two places. I love my life here in Austria, but I still want my base in California where my parents are, right? So it's kind of, I think after these 10 years, I can't say I don't look at California and say I don't want anything to do with it. I I would still love to be there. So my dream would be okay, I live in Austria for 9 months out of the year, and then I'm in California for 3 months out of the year. Because I mean, do I enjoy that the shops are closed on Sunday? No. I used to go shopping every Sunday with, so I'm not really pleased about that. Do I, do I miss the convenience of America? Yeah, of course. But I'm obviously not looking to live there full time because it's just not the place for me. Did that answer the question? I kind of went a little bit wound about there, but essentially, you know, I left at a good time. I also just had to make that decision that, hey, I'm not happy where I am. I'm probably going to be happier somewhere else. So let's at least vet that out because I can always fly home, right? Buying a ticket back home is a lot. It's pretty easy. Let's be real. And now it's just kind of, well, how do I figure out how to keep incorporating my previous life, so my family and friends from California that I do miss now, but also just stay abroad because I'm a lifer, right? I'm not necessarily going to move back ever.
Yeah. Yeah, you've settled into a different phase of expat life that I see happen a lot. It's funny, our timelines are like super similar. So I'm also returning to this idea of like kind of living in two places. I do feel really at home in Europe, and I like my lifestyle here for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, the convenience and comforts, and traveling is still like a key part of it for me. So I want to have these easy jumping off points to other places and discovering new places. But at the same time, like I'm close with my family. I have like a really strong group of friends back home. I'm kind of tired of missing out on certain things that, events or activities or get togethers or whatever. And like, that's very important to me. And mixing in, I find myself more and more like wanting to take those travel trips, like back home, which is such a weird thing because it used to be in the other direction. So, my wife and I are looking at the exact same thing, like basically kind of doing like 9 and 3 or 10 and 2 or something like that, where we're back there 2 to 3 times per year for 3 to 5 weeks or so at a time. And as you said, like I think there's this in our minds, there's this block that it's like a big deal to fly back and forth. And I know this is a privileged thing, but like I, for example, just flew back to the US round trip for like under $500. And I was there. I left my house here, and 13 hours later, I was at the house there. Like it's like literally breakfast here and dinner there, and it wasn't that big a deal. In reality, there was a half a day of jet lag, and I was good. So I don't know. Like it doesn't have to be this this like mutually exclusive life, I guess, is the thing that I'm pulling out here. It's like, it's not all or nothing. You can kind of have both if you plan ahead and kind of build your life that way. And also nothing is like, for a lot of people, it doesn't have to be for forever, right? Like you can come over here and do this for a few years and then move back to your old life. In your case, like you've established yourself here in Austria with a family and everything. And that's awesome. But if you guys really needed to, you could go back. And so I think a lot of people get stuck in this like finality stage where that's like, it's not, it doesn't have to be for forever for everyone.
Life changes all the time. Just go with it.
Yeah. Well, something we just touched on there that I think is interesting is like, I believe a lot of people, when they think of this, being an expat, or maybe they wrap up in that like a digital nomad, they think about it as a young person's game, like pre-family, pre-roots, like just kind of frivolous traveling and, just like an experience. But becoming like building a family abroad comes with its own set of challenges. And you've gone on to also build a business abroad. So you've kind of taken on like two of the major challenges, I would say, that the average expat probably doesn't deal with, or the average digital nomad doesn't deal with, who just kind of like brings their laptop with them and posts up somewhere and that's it. I wonder if you could shed some light on, any highlights, lowlights, challenges, whatever of from this aspect.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride. I'd say that. I'm still honestly, if you see me, you'll still think I'm the digital nomad because I just have my laptop everywhere. And, you know, as long as I got my personal hotspot and my laptop, I work. So, um, but let's see. So the business came first. So basically, I moved abroad, right? I was working at Cisco, and I, like every other American, I was like, wait, do I still have to file my US taxes from abroad? And then the answer is yes. If you are a US, citizen or a green card holder, and you have, income over the filing threshold, which is pretty low, so about 12,000, 13,000 now for single filers, you have to file a US tax return. And at that time, I had looked at Cisco to help me, and they were like, well, I'm not going to pay for that. And we're like, okay, well, can you at least recommend me to someone? They recommended me to one of the big four, and they were like, yeah, it's $2,000 to start the initial consultation. I'm like, what? I don't make that much money to pay you $2,000 to do my taxes. And so I do the next option, right? Okay, let me jump to that, the do it yourself tax software based in the US. And it's like, I enter my income, and they ask me within 10 minutes, 5 times, it looks like you are abroad. Where do you live? I'm like, yeah, I already told you I live in Austria. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then, so that didn't work. And then I ended up going with, a kind of a US based firm that said that they specialize in expat taxes. And then, long story short, my tax documents somehow wound up in Australia instead of Austria. And I was like, no, this cannot be the way. This cannot be it. And so I, obviously was tech at the time. I was in finance, and I was telling my co-founders who were also at Cisco, like, let's let's solve this. You guys are, they're the developers. I can be the finance part of it. And then so that's how it started. Again, I condensed everything because obviously there's a lot more to that. But we started my expat taxes in 2018, right? Started thinking about it in 2017, started in 2018. And the goal had always been, I want to use a tax software. I want a tax software that I can use myself, right? That I can make my life easier. Because this cannot be, if I have this problem, the other 9 million Americans that are, as they say, are living abroad must have this same problem. And that's really where it went from. It started as a purely do-it-yourself tax software, and then we realized people needed help more than just doing it yourself. They wanted to talk to a tax professional, so we added on the professional, the premium packages, and then we said, okay, well, we'll help more of the simple cases. And then people came in that just didn't have these simple cases anymore, right? They had foreign corporations that they set up, they had these complex foreign pensions, they had foreign investments, they had, et cetera, et cetera, just more complex cases. They gave up their U.S. citizenship, they got U.S. citizenship, except, it really became that people just flooded in saying, I have all these complex topics and nobody will help me for a reasonable price. And so that's where we are today. My Expat Taxes being the leading US expat tax software that someone that just, moved to Asia to be an English teacher could use, right? Just has salaried income, or someone that has multiple foreign corporations, multiple foreign investments could also use. And the price difference is not huge between them. I mean, obviously, the more complex it gets, there's obviously additional fees to it. But it was really just to have this platform where if you're an expat, we'll try to help you with your tax situation because we know it can be confusing. And that's my expat taxes. That's building the business. Obviously, this is between 2018 now to 2024. We just had, April 15th behind us, which was really crazy this year because we're growing 30-40% every single year at this point. So it's it's amazing to see how many people are out there and how much our tax software has been able to help them. And, to hear all these people say that this has really taken away the stress, and at least they know that there's someone that understands their situation. But yeah, so that's 2018 to now. And then inside of that, I had 2 children, bought a house, a lot, right? So let's say 2020 was when I had my first child. That was obviously in the middle, like right before, no, actually right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was also stressful. And then I had my second child last year, in January. So with the family aspect, I mean, Austria is an amazing place to have children. it beats it. From everything, the checkups while you're pregnant, to the hospital you get to stay in, to the service they give you, to the government supporting you afterwards. It's amazing. So I don't think I could have done it without being in Austria. And then on the other side, it's also the mentality is in Austria, it's given that if you have children, if you are the birthing parent, I think is the term now, the birthing parent, then you are kind of expected to take a year off, right? So nobody expects you to work in that year. Obviously, I have a business, so that's not so easy to achieve, but nobody expects you to work, and that's very different than in Silicon Valley. I mean, my colleagues there, they give birth and then they literally get fired while they're pregnant, because you can do that in America and you cannot do that here in Austria. And so it was easy for me to, ease back into it as I could. But obviously we're not on this, and I think we're actually getting towards time. So I condense it into a summary, but living abroad has its challenges, but if you choose a country that has a really good, social infrastructure and support from the government, it makes it easier to balance everything. And, again, it's kind of, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do little things at a time. And so obviously there were days where it was very overwhelming to raise two 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 new human beings. And there were days where it was a little bit easier. And so then those days I could focus on the business, and other days I could focus on raising children. I'm not going to recommend what I did to anyone, because I think I definitely worked a lot more than anyone should work when they have kids, but it is the way it is when you have a business that continues to grow, and, clients that have expectations of you and that you obviously want to meet and fulfill. However, I think for, all the other expats out there, there's never a right time to do anything. So just do it and go with the flow. It'll all work out in its own. You will survive. The kids will eventually sleep better. Things that you had on your to-do list at work will eventually get done. That's the main story. So now with the expat aspect of it, traveling is probably the hardest part with kids, right? It's a lot easier to just pack up your own suitcase, jump on a plane. You don't care where you sit. You have no problem just watching a movie for 10 hours. Traveling with small kids, whole different ball game. I am very stressed out for my upcoming flight to California, but we've made it. My first child has been to California 2 times, Vietnam 2 times. My second child just went to Vietnam earlier this year, so this will be his first time to California. So we make it. Stressful, but like I said, you'll make it eventually. Yeah.
It's good advice.
Any parent that's listening to me can tell from my very nervous laugh, and they're probably chuckling themselves. I end it there. So probably you have some closing questions or something for me, or
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I could talk to you about this stuff for forever. I know we have a time limit here. We have to get you back to real work before too long. But I do think it's just a couple interesting points. Is first of all, like you mentioned, the social safety net that was in place, and maybe even more importantly, like the mentality, because you as a business person technically could, as a business owner, could technically neglect those rules or expectations or not. But I think there's something to be said. Like, I've talked to so many fellow Americans who have moved to a foreign country and had some fear around, like, how am I going to do this abroad? Right. Like, how am I going to have children abroad? And all, like, I know how this works in the US. I don't know how this is going to work abroad. And almost always the story is like, I'm so pleasantly surprised, like the medical care, the expectations around returning to work, the social systems in place to help take care of me and my kids, like, early on. So, for people out there, I think it's the reason I highlight that is, like, that's a consistent theme that I hear when I talk to guests on the show, that, like, their expectations are met or exceeded in that regard. So if that's a fear for you, like, maybe you can temper that fear a little bit. And then the other thing I think is like, yeah, that expectation around returning to work. Like you could have just said like, oh, I'm just gonna, whatever, I'm just gonna get past it. But being in a place like Austria made you feel more comfortable easing back into it. And I think that's like, there's no value you can put on that. Like there's a lot to be
Yeah,
said for this.
definitely. And little plug here for Mike's with Taxes. A benefit for having kids abroad, if you get them their social security number, is you probably get a refund on your taxes. So that's also something. If you live in Europe, if you live in a high tax country, right, and you're not using the foreign earned income exclusion, if you even know what that means. But basically, long story short, if you live in a high tax country and you have kids, U.S. children with social security numbers under the age of 17, you will most likely be looking at, now in 2023, tax year 2023, $1,600 as a refund
Wow.
per child. So people that haven't been filing their taxes, and they go through us for the streamlined procedure. So for example, you haven't filed because you didn't realize you had to file, and now you're listening to me and you're stressing out. Don't stress out. There's a procedure for, and there's a solution to everything. It starts with myexpattaxes.com. There's my plug.
Naturally.
But basically, if you haven't been filing, we have people that come in and then they have children and they didn't get the stimulus payments from 2020 and 2021, and they file their taxes from 2020 to 2023. And these people are looking at like tens of thousands in refunds. It's wild, completely wild, right? So again, I think to go with everything, right, and to, obviously close it up to be aligned with Mike's Fit Taxes, who is proudly sponsoring this podcast. Yeah, things are scary. A lot of things are scary. Moving abroad is scary. Having kids is scary. Building a business is scary. Doing your US taxes from abroad is all scary. However, just take the first step. Take the first step in figuring out what you want to do. Take the first step to go on myexpattaxes.com and enter in, your username and email.
Nicely placed.
But
I like it.
take the first step, and I promise you, as you go through it, the path will get more clear and it will get easier, right? People will be there to support you if you ask for help, right? So, like we already mentioned in multiple parts of this episode, people will help you if you ask for help. If you have to do your US taxes, we will help you, definitely. So I leave it there. I don't know, Chase, any closing remarks?
No, I think it's a great place to leave it, and I'm tempted to do that. I was going to ask you one more question earlier, and we'll leave it there with this. You mentioned things like the foreign earned income tax exclusion, or the FEIE. You mentioned before that, like, a lot of people don't. A lot of Americans that move abroad don't even realize that they're supposed to file their taxes. And then there's also this. It's a fact, but I think it's also misinterpreted. That like all Americans are going to be double taxed, right? Like you're going to end up paying taxes in two places if you move abroad, and so there's a lot of misconceptions or things that people don't understand about being an expat. As I'm talking particularly about Americans moving abroad in this case. From your perspective, what is the number one misconception or misunderstanding, and your suggestion for addressing this?
The number one misconception I would say is, again, you are not double taxed. You are not double taxed in most situations. Let me rephrase it. There are some situations, but generally, if you are paying taxes in your local country on your income, right, you can take a credit for that on your US taxes. Now the misconception comes in that if you are working in the UK and you pay UK tax on your wages, and then you make, capital gains, income, interest, dividends from your US brokerages while abroad, and you do not report that to the UK, and then you file your tax return and you wonder why you owe taxes. Well, I'm sorry to say that is not double taxation, because the UK did not get to tax your US investment income first. So that's kind of the big one. So I tease it there. People with US brokerages and stuff, you have to be a little bit more careful. Let's put it this way. If you're interested, right? If you're interested in more about taxes, we obviously didn't want to bore you the first time around. Let Chase know. I'm happy to jump on for a little bit more of a tax specific version. I'll still make it fun, I promise. I'm pretty good at that. At least as fun as taxes can be. But if you take anything away from your US taxes, don't be stressed, there's a solution. That solution can be myexpattaxes.com. That solution can be something else. Doesn't have to be us, but we're obviously here to help. Make sure that if you have US source income or income that you're not taxing where you live locally, that you do your US taxes by April 15th, because it is possible that you owe taxes. If you make over 150K and you do have also investment income, try to file your taxes by April 15th, because there's such thing called net investment income tax, which is a social security tax on your investment income. That is the one case where there can be double taxation. It's not a lot. It's a 3.8% on your net investment income. But basically, that's the situations where you can owe tax. And before you jump into opening a foreign limited liability company, before you jump into making foreign investments that your local bank, recommends to you, before you start opening crazy pension plans, basically before you do something huge, like a big financial decision that's abroad, think about the US tax side a little bit first. We obviously have planning sessions where you can, pay to kind of vet out what your ideas are and how that impacts your US side. But main thing is, you are an American. You do have to think about US taxes. Planning is key here. And if you plan well, everything will be fine. If you don't plan well, there can be surprises around tax time. But even if there are surprises, we'll always be there to help you figure out the solution to them.
Great place to end it. Nathalie, thank you so much for sharing your story. Some awesome advice there to cap this off. We have links to My Expat Taxes in the show notes. If there's anywhere else people should follow along, you can let them know here. But otherwise, we appreciate it. Love the service that you offer, serving literally tens of thousands of expats around the world with one of the biggest headaches that we have to take on otherwise. So thanks for solving a true pain point and doing it in such an awesome way. We appreciate you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Then My Expat Taxes is just where you'll find all the information. We're obviously on Instagram as well. And then you can hear more tax facts that, are honestly just not entertaining enough to be on this episode.
Well, you guys, the audience can let me know if they want to go deeper on taxes. We'll bring you back and answer all your questions. But we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.
Perfect. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.